Let's start the show by talking about my sponsor, Paloma Verde, and their new website, palomaverdecbd.com. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and check them out for all of your CBD needs. They've got the gummies, tinctures, salves. So if you're needing anything to maybe chill you out, something to help you get mellowed out, something for your joint pain and stiffness, go over to palomaverdecbd.com and give them a check out. Carlos and Vanessa are awesome people. They run a great company. And if you enter the promo code FACTS at checkout, you'll get 25% off your order. Plus, any order over $75, you get free shipping. So, I don't know what you're waiting for. Head over to palomaverdecbd.com and check them out. Let's start the show. This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, Fact Check This podcast. I'm not sure what episode this is going to be. I've actually talked about I'm going to stop putting the episode number at the beginning of it because now that I'm starting to pre-record some stuff plus do a few more interviews and stuff, it's going to get kind of jumbled and I don't know exactly what order I'm putting everything out in. So I'm just going to stop saying the episode number at the top of the show and we're just going to roll with this is Fact Check This podcast, whatever it is, and it'll come out whenever it drops. And today I've got Jim McGill of the Ignore This Rant podcast back with me. Jim came on forever ago, like when I first started. I think it was episode 9 or 10 when you were my first interview ever on the show. So Jim, how's everything been going? What you got going on?
What's up, Justin? I appreciate you having me on once again. Nice to come back. Yeah, I believe the first time I was on was back in November. It was right after the election because I remember we talked about that. Things are going well. Still doing the Ignore the Rant podcast. I think we're about to drop episode 47. We took a few months off. Just everybody's schedules got crazy. I think from March and April and May. We kind of took a little hiatus, but we came back and surprisingly our listenership, if anything's gone up. So things are going well over there. Hopefully one of these days I'll get you on one of our episodes with us. But right now we barely even know what we're doing. So once we figure that out, we'll have you on.
I don't know that any of us actually know what we're doing. Even the ones who do this like professionally, just from talking to them and engaging with them on a regular basis. I'm not 100% sure any of us really know what we're doing. We're all just kind of throwing stuff around in the dark and seeing what sticks. But it's still a lot of fun. And if we can find, decent topics to talk about from week to week, like you said, we talked about the election last time, and you would think maybe in the 6-7 months since then, the world might have gotten back to normal and calmed down. And if anything, I think it's gone in the complete opposite direction. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, because I've been holding on to this nugget for a couple weeks. And knowing that you were going to be on, I thought you would be a perfect person to talk to about this. We're going to talk about January 6th and the end of democracy that almost was. What are your thoughts on that?
9/11 right times 2.
Well,
I know that obviously I watched it live. I knew something was going to happen. I was watching a lot of the streams. If there's one thing that I can say that came out of 2020, it's the year of the streamer, the live streamer, and moments of unrest. Because that's what I spent most of my evenings during the summer last year doing, was just watching all of this riot footage from live streamers in the middle of it. And so when everybody knew that there was going to be some gathering, protest, marching, whatever, but in this case, in the Trump faction, my antenna was up and I was ready to see what was going to take place. And so I remember on the night of January 5th, I was watching, I forget who, but I was watching live streamers of just, hey, is this thing going to kick off now? Or they, what does it look like there in the thick of it on the street? And I remember seeing a lot of questionable people in the crowd, not any more questionable than what we saw over the summer, but I was looking for provocateurs. I was looking for people that might not belong in that crowd, because I just knew that this was going to be something really big. All eyes were going to be on it. And I was skeptical. Let's just say I was skeptical before we ever even got to the 6th. But once January 6th happened, I had the news on, probably like most everybody else. I was working from home and I watched the entire day unfold and my jaw was on the floor because I couldn't believe I was seeing what I was seeing because it looked far more crazy through the lens of a television than it did through the lens of the people that were actually on site in the building. So switching from on TV to the live streamers going in and out of the Capitol, just trying to get a better assessment of what was actually going on there. And my first takeaway was this doesn't seem like they're really putting up much of a fight to make sure that this didn't happen. And
Yeah,
that's where I was from the moment that I was watching it happen.
there was one live
What
stream
is
channel on YouTube that had 4 separate streams going at the same time, and they would alternate between different ones, but you always had at least 2 of them from people who were inside of the Capitol building, and like there was no violent insurrection. There was like, aside from, and even the chick that got shot, she wasn't like, somebody knocked the hole in the window or whatever, and she just looked in. She wasn't even doing anything. Like, she wasn't trying to get in. The news and the leftists like really play that up like she was trying to break into this office or whatever. Like, I was watching the video live when it happened. Like, she literally just walked up and stuck her head up to the window to see what was going on, and then you got shot in the face. Like, so yeah, like you were saying, the story that was, being told, and the picture that was being painted from the mainstream media and everything that was going on versus what you could actually see happening inside the building were just 2 completely different things. And it's like, in the months since then, it's almost like all of that live footage from the people who were actually in the Capitol building, it's like it doesn't even exist. Like, nobody talks about any of that. It's only the mainstream narrative that gets pushed on it. Nobody talks about the fact that, like, they were the rioters, were walking around with the very minimal Capitol Police that were available in the building, and they were coordinating, getting everybody rounded up so that they could all peacefully walk back out of the building after they'd had time to walk around and take selfies and do dumb shit. Like, it wasn't some, like, it wasn't the end of democracy. It was dudes taking a walk around, almost a guided tour with, Capitol Police.
Yeah. No, here's the biggest takeaway that I think anybody that thinks that it was this great threat against democracy, they reconvened the same day. Like, it didn't stop, it paused it for 4 hours or whatever it was. If it was an insurrection, it was the worst insurrection ever. It was unarmed. Now, granted, were there fights? Were there scuffles? Did people get injured? Yep. But at the same time, were there also people literally taking selfies with the Capitol Police and thanking them for their service as they were being allowed to just continue through the building? Yep. And both of them, I don't know which one happened more or less, but I'd say from what I saw, at worst, it was 50-50, if not 60-40, 70-30, and right this way. Just stay between the velvet ropes and continue on. We got what we needed. You're now in the building.
So there was one live feed that was like from the tunnels underneath the Capitol building or whatever, where the Capitol Police were like holding a stand after they had gotten everybody out, and a secondary group was trying to make another push back in. There was some live stream video of the Capitol Police and their reinforcements holding that line, and then the protesters surging and pushing against it. But even with that, like, they would push and then they would push back. And at one point, one of the Capitol Police, or National Guardsmen, whatever. Like one of the guys on the resistance side got pinned in a door, and he was getting like smashed and hurt. And everybody on the this violent mob protester side, they were like, hold up, we got to get this guy out. Like they backed off, got the guy out, made sure that he was okay, got him back on the other side of, like, on his side of the line, made sure that like a medic or somebody was able to get him so he could receive treatment and get care. And then they started pushing again. Like that's not how legitimate insurgency works. Like if this was an actual threat, they would have absolutely stampeded that dude. They wouldn't have pulled back and checked on him to make sure he was okay and helped him get help. Like everything about the actual live footage from what was going on just told a completely different story than anything that you will ever hear from it ever again, really.
Yeah. And the funniest part to me is that the United States government, one that is very well versed in insurrections and toppling governments, is sitting here trying to claim that that is what this was. And it's like, are you serious? Like some people had got roughed up and got sprayed with bear mace. I would dare to say that what we saw over the summer was leagues worse than what happened on January 6th, in almost every way, because most of the stuff that was getting damaged were private property, not government property.
So that brings up an interesting point and something that I wanted to touch on specifically. I'm going to hit the share screen here and pull something up. So this is from Tucker Carlson, about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, something like that, talking about the unindicted co-conspirators in this whole thing. So this is gonna be a lot of fun. I'm gonna play this right quick, and then.
And speaking of January 6th, why are there still so many things, basic factual matters, that we don't understand about that day? Why is the Biden administration preventing us from knowing? Why is the administration still hiding more than 10,000 hours of surveillance tape from the U.S. Capitol on January 6th? What could possibly be the reason for that? Even as they call for more openness, we need to get to the bottom of it. They could release those tapes today, but they're not. Why? We ought to be asking those questions urgently, because as the Attorney General reminded us today, a lot depends on the answers. And at least one news organization is asking that, Revolver News. It's a news site. It's turned out to be one of the last honest outlets on the internet. A new piece on revolver.news suggests an answer to some of these questions. We know that the government is hiding the identity of many law enforcement officers who were present at the Capitol on January 6th, not just the one who killed Ashley Babbitt. According to the government's own court filings, those law enforcement officers participated in the riot, sometimes in violent ways. We know that because, without fail, the government has thrown the book at most people who were present in the Capitol on January 6th. There was a nationwide dragnet to find them, and many of them are still in solitary confinement tonight. But strangely, some of the key people who participated on January 6th have not been charged. Look at the documents. The government calls those people unindicted co-conspirators. What does that mean? Well, it means that in potentially every single case, they were FBI operatives. Really? In the Capitol on January 6th.
And if you go and look at the Revolver article, like it goes into a whole lot more detail, and Tucker even gets into a whole lot more detail in it's about a 9.5 minute clip, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but like he gets into a lot more detail with it as well. Like there were at least 3 who were primary antagonists and instigators of these riots that coordinated and set the whole thing up, that are considered unindicted co-conspirators. They're unnamed. They are person 1, person 2, and person 3 or something like that. Like these guys, they're straight up feds. Like this. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was totally an inside job. It was an inside job to create something that wasn't there to drive a narrative. Like they know what they're doing. Like you said, I mean, this stuff doesn't happen by accident, and which gets me to something else I want to talk about. But like had you seen the Tucker clip or heard that yet, or have you seen the Revolver article or any of that yet?
So I saw the Tucker clip the night that it aired, and I have not seen the Revolver article, but obviously he makes a lot of good points, and for me, it just reaffirmed kind of what I already, I guess I can't say that I knew it, but you're going to have to convince me otherwise. You're going to have to verifiably prove that I was incorrect in thinking what I thought, and what I thought and what I will still stick to this day is that. But yeah, basically what I saw and what I already was looking for even the night before were, dare I say, federal employees being in the audience, saying outlandish things, and they did. I have it. I tweeted it out from my Twitter account saying, oh, Tucker Carlson saying that the FBI might be involved in January 6th. You don't say. And then I posted a screen grab that I got that from the night of the 5th, where there's an obvious federal agent in the middle of this crowd. Baked Alaska is there. They're all circled around this guy, and he's saying, look, I might go to jail for saying this, but tomorrow we need to go into the Capitol. We need to go inside the Capitol. And everybody in the crowd is like, what? No. And then they start chanting Fed, like Fed, 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 Fed. It was obvious. It was even obvious to the people that were there at the time. And for the uninitiated, for the people that don't know how these things work, this is exactly how they go. This is exactly how they go down. Remember how much stink was made back at the very beginning of the George Floyd protests, where that mysterious man in the umbrella was just walking straight up to the AutoZone and just mashing out windows, and then poof, it was on after that. It was clear as day that guy was screaming. He was screaming that he was antagonizing, to say the least. And this was no different. If anything, you just had more of them in there. And I guess for me, maybe I'm just a little worn down by it, because I'm like, yeah, who is shocked by this? And if you are shocked, welcome to the party. This is where we some of us have been forever. Not everything is a false flag, but that one, well,
it was like the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot that it turned out there were actually more federal agents in that group plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer than there were actual conspirators in the thing. Like, it was like a group of 5 guys that were going to, kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. And at the end of the day, it turns out that 3 of those were actually federal agents. And the other 2, like the 2 who were actually the conspirators in it, they were both they both have some mental issues, to say the least. And basically a bunch of feds figured out that they could antagonize these guys into doing something ridiculous, or not even doing it, like agreeing to it. All these guys did was agree to the plot of some federal agents to kidnap the governor. Like, they had no actual plan. They were never going to carry this out. But it became like mainstream news that these crazy right-wing extremists were going to kidnap the governor. And the whole thing was a fucking federal agent plot just to create a story, and paint these people as psychopaths. They didn't even come up with the idea themselves. They were goaded into it, which we could take that and look at the war on terror and everything that's gone on since 9/11. And how many times has Scott Horton and Brian Dawson talked about the terror cells that were federal agents goading Middle Easterners into agreeing to something that they didn't want to do. They had no intention of carrying out, but they instigated them into agreeing to something so that they could attack these, or make all these arrests and shut down these terror cells that were really just FBI and CIA pushing people in the wrong direction to drive a narrative. I mean,
yeah, and that's not how, to play devil's advocate or bring it back a little bit, that's not how every operation works. That's not how each Fed operates. But when they need something to happen, they can find a way to make it happen. Not everybody out there that wants to do bad things or tries to carry out bad things are goaded by the feds, but when we're at a point where it feels like there should be something like that, they'll find the people that are, for lack of a better term, not smart enough to know what they're getting into and push them into that. There's that famous meme that's going around where it has an FBI agent poking the Chad guy, hey, do some terrorism. It's like, yeah, they want that. They need that level of outburst or that negative action to occur so that it can justify their strengthening their own ability to try to shut it down, which all that ends up being is a greater power expansion for them to be used at their discretion against us. Anybody that's a dissonant or disagrees or is critical of the government, not exactly what you would say is a symptom of a free society. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And now you're seeing it kind of coming back around full circle with all of the COVID stuff now with the Delta variant and all of this stuff. Like it's more of that same, it's along the same vein of goading the right people who aren't smart enough to pay attention and understand what's going on to drive the fear porn of like, we need more government intervention, when the government intervention is what caused the problem to begin with in almost every case. Like the times when it's a naturally occurring problem is the exception, not the rule, right? Like,
yeah. And it's kind of funny. I think I talked about this on last week's episode of my podcast about, we played the Jon Stewart bit that went viral from Colbert, where he's making fun of like, I just really want to think science, and that this time was caused likely by science. I can't believe you're saying this. And I said on my podcast, I'm like, yeah, he hit his comedic marks, but this shit infuriates the ever-loving hell out of me. It's like, say that last March. Say that when it's dangerous to say it, not when it's approved to say it, not when the narrative has come around to saying, I think that some of the claims that seemed outrageous might actually have some merit. It's like, no. The gaslighting of the American people has to stop. Otherwise, you will see actual people doing what the feds want them to do. And once it's not in the feds' control, I think that's when we're going to see that it's not a good thing to tamper with and start pushing people in that direction.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm, talking about Jon Stewart, at least Bill Maher has, like, I've never been I used to watch Bill Maher back. My granddad, when he was alive, he watched Bill Maher regularly. And even though my granddad was a hardcore conservative, he watched Bill Maher. And so I would watch Bill Maher too, especially if I was like hanging out with him or something. But I've always kind of enjoyed Bill Maher, but I've also taken everything that he's said like with a grain of salt. Like I've never particularly cared for his viewpoint on things, but I've always appreciated it and at least enjoyed watching the show, and especially when they have all of the guests on and they get to arguing and bickering with each other. Like it gets entertaining. But here lately, Bill Maher has been really good, especially on like the COVID stuff and the lockdown stuff, and like he's really pissing off a lot of his more dedicated fan base, which is just, you would think maybe to have that mainstream voice coming out and saying this stuff, it might change some opinions. It might get people to look at stuff or think a little bit more critically. And instead, like they just hunker down even further into their rut. And like I have been nothing short of dumbfounded at how just completely brainwashed the overwhelming majority of the population seems to have become through all of this. And I wanted to use that as kind of a segue, because that is sort of one of the things that are the main thing that I wanted to get you on for, was we were going to talk about messaging and how do we kind of get that message out and change hearts and minds on some of this stuff.
I think the biggest thing with messaging, it's funny because right now that's a big topic, especially in our, and we can get into that if you want to, but I personally subscribe to the idea and the belief that there isn't one way to message, because there's not one person that you're trying to message to, and everybody thinks differently. Everybody has different reactions to things. Some people don't want sensationalism. Other people, you can't get their attention without it. So I think as far as messaging goes, is the correct messaging. That is the correct way to message. And I guess we're going to have to look at specific issues or situations, but I say do everything down the middle by the book is just as good as saying the most infuriating, inflammatory stuff that you could possibly come up with, because both of them work to get a different message out there, and one message isn't going to be for everybody. And so as much as you can put out there, I say go for it. I don't know if that answers your question, but I just think that there's a time and place for everything.
Like, we've both been watching and paying attention to the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire thing, and they had, like, I love the Twitter feed that they had running. Like, it is definitely not the way I would approach if I was running a state party. Like, it's not the way I would take the Twitter feed, but it was effective in what Jeremy Kauffman and those guys were trying to do. Like, I understood the purpose behind it. But then at the same time, you look at, like, the state of Indiana, we have a very strong Libertarian Party here. We had a really good governor's election here in 2020, where we got a higher percentage of the vote than I think any other governor candidate across the country ever has for a Libertarian. We've got an initiative in place to put people in races for literally every election on the state and federal level that's coming up in the state of Indiana in 2022. And we have a strong party. We would never, like, the state of Indiana would never take that kind of an approach with messaging. It is very above board. It's a very clean, good, like, it is it's what you expect from a strong political party, not from, edgelords and stuff like that. And it's, so the approaches are very, very drastically different. But I think, to an extent, we have similar successes. Indiana is very successful as a Libertarian Party, and we have one of the most organized parties, I think, in the country as far as the state level goes. New Hampshire clearly got a lot of attention. Kentucky has been getting a lot of attention with their Twitter feed and being a little more edgy and stuff. And, like, each of those states also have, at least from, the way things are kind of shaping up, they have strong state parties. So obviously there's not a right answer. I understand the need for maybe a little bit more radical messaging, but like, Indiana has taken very strong stances on certain topics, and it hasn't been inflammatory, but it has been very strong, very like, aggressive messaging on stuff that establishes the position of the state party and makes it very clear that, like, this is what we think. And like I said, it's nothing that's, like, crazy or inflammatory, but it's also very, very strong messaging. And I think that's the big problem that comes out of the LP National, is it's not even strong. Like, it's just bleh.
Yep. Tax is bad. Don't hurt anybody. Send.
Yeah.
You're turning off libertarians. Is like, and I agree with you. If somebody handed me the keys to the New Hampshire Libertarian Twitter account, I probably wouldn't tweet the same things, but it's only because I'm not as clever and as creative as Jeremy is. coming from, like, official state party should only be state party planks and, and that kind of thing. And I understand that. However, even Dave has kind of changed on that once he saw the results from it. 12 million interactions with I guess the most egregious tweet. And you can't really poo-poo on the results. If it's effective, if it's working, you maybe tweak it, but you don't stop doing it. And I can understand the outrage from the other side. It's not like I can't understand where the people are coming from that are upset by it. But at the same time, it's like, that's the point. That's what it was trying to do, was get people upset, get them out of their slumber. And, and I can understand people wanting there to be more decorum and all this stuff, but those people that want that don't seem to be accepting the world that we're currently living in. We've been flooded with a lack of decorum for decades. And now all of a sudden this, the third party is supposed to be the shining light on the hill of how to message in a political realm effectively while being the gentleman in the room. I mean, that's not what we're here for anyway.
Right.
If the libertarians are here to fundamentally tear down the state and all the apparatus that we all equally claim to be against, I don't think we need to get sidetracked with messaging.
And talking about decorum, like, look no further than just the last 4 years of Trump, and not only Trump, but also the Democratic response to him. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, AOC, even Bernie Sanders. Like, they have all taken their shots and gone out of their way to do some pretty edgelordy shit, and say some pretty harsh stuff and not behave in what's considered a polite political manner, right? Like, so why do we have to be the ones who are milquetoast on everything 100% of the time, when clearly some of this inflammatory shit, it at least gets the conversation going? If you're not even in the conversation at all, then you don't stand a chance. And that's where the Libertarian Party has been. Is it's not that we aren't being heard, it's that we're not even in the conversation to be heard. So we've got to at least do something that gets us in the conversation.
Exactly. And it's another symptom of kind of where we're at as a society anyway, where if you look at, especially, like, I'm 38, I'll be 39 in a couple older than what's on now. There's a lot of shows like Married with Children probably couldn't be made today. In Living Color probably couldn't be made today. There's a lot of TV that I grew up on lose their minds over if it came out now. And so it's like, we're talking about politics. To me, politics is war. It's somebody trying to gain power over another. People have bought far and wide, too much into it, but that's where we're at. So accordingly and effectively, and you don't do that in this absolute shit show of political realm that we're in by coming out and saying, okay, guys, let's tamper it down. Like, let's all be, cordial about this. It's like, no, they want you to not exist. That's what they want. And they'll muzzle you. I mean, look at what is going on now with Biden's administration saying, oh, well, the federal government can seize any .com, .org, .tv website if we deem it to be problematic. People like us would easily be considered terrorists or dissonants of the current power structure because we don't jive with it. We don't agree with it. But we want to get held back because we say no things on Twitter. It's hilarious.
And like the thing that kills me the most about, saying the no things is every YouTube video that I've had taken down for medical misinformation. In my appeal, I provided the actual article or research study that backed what I said, and my appeals were still denied. Like, it's not about saying something that's not true. It's about saying something that doesn't fit what they want you to say. That's 100% what it is. Like literally every single video that I've had taken down, I provided links to the articles and to the research studies that showed what I said was accurate and factual. And I take that back. I got one appeal overturned. It was early on too. It was like in July or August of last year. It was before the election. I got one appeal overturned, and since then, not a single one. They don't even get the time of day, and it's insane. I've stopped appealing with articles and just giving like completely profanity strewn responses to the removals, just to see how far I can push it before they just completely deplatform me off of YouTube.
Yeah, you else to them and see what happens. But that's the bigger thing, is like that is the, to quote Tom Woods, that's the I laugh at. I think it's cheesy as all hell, but we remember it, so I guess it works. But he's not wrong. There is that little narrow area that you can that you're allowed to play within. But if you go outside that, sandbox, you got to leave the playground. And that is the big thing to me, because we've seen it, especially over the last year and a half, between COVID, the coverage of the BLM riots, the election, January 6th, and now coming out of COVID, the vaccines, all of those things I just mentioned, you're only allowed to talk about in a certain way that supports only one side. And if you dare say anything about any of those any other way, you're immediately like, nope, you are not fit for polite society. And I think that is naturally going to draw out people that want to say the most insane things, even if they're correct, acceptable, allowable speech pattern. Because if that's the world that we do live in, which is showing that is the case, then I think you have to quote Trump, fight like hell to try to get it back. And right now, words are what we're using. If words are violence, then words is what we're going to be using to get our message across, that we reject the notion that we're not allowed to say things, especially when we are correct and when people are not being allowed to hear it. I think that is anybody's duty that knows better, to have the most egregious, loudest, sensational, whatever messaging possible to break through and have enough people see it to where collectively people just say, all right, F this. We're not doing this anymore.
Yeah, definitely. So just a quick little aside, something that I have noticed across like all platforms, not just for stuff that I've had removed, but things that other people I know have had removed. Like, if you can cite sources, and especially if in either the article that you write or whatever you like, the video or audio that you post, if you actually cite and link sources, that gets taken down immediately. Like, if you can actually factually prove what you're saying, that's gone. They don't want that anywhere to be found. Like, they remove that shit immediately. It doesn't. I've actually, it wasn't something that I posted for my own site. It was something that I can't remember if I posted it for Peddling Fiction or Lions of Liberty. It was something that I had posted on one of the other podcast social media accounts. And before it even finished processing to fully upload and post, it got taken down. Like, they are quick on the trigger to take out. If you can actually show proof of what you're saying, that can't stand. And that is straight out of 1984. That is straight up Ministry of Truth, like, censoring and editing the history and changing things so that the only thing that exists is what the state says. And this is the way it is, and this is the way it always has been. And it doesn't matter if you can remember 2 months ago when that's not the way it was. This is the way it always has been. Somebody made the joke on Twitter a few months ago that people are going to be finding their masks that they wore when they were in high school. People that are our age are going to be pulling their masks out of the woodwork from that they wore when they were seniors in high school. Like, and honestly, it's going to happen. Like, that's it. It's not that far fetched of a thing to say and to expect to see.
No, absolutely. And it's funny talking about things getting pulled. It's a lot of it is now handled by AI. So the AI, this is a huge, the last, again, going back over the last year and a half, they have really perfected or have improved upon, I think, things that they were wanting to get done regardless. But this gave them the perfect opportunity between face recognition and AI that can pick up on certain, cues, words, whatever. It's even got to the point now where memes, even if memes don't even have a word in it, memes will get yanked. Like in the Peddling Fiction, the meme stream that you put on every Monday. There was one that got pulled of mine a couple weeks ago that I posted back in August. Didn't even have a word on it. Just was a depiction of Peter Griffin as Grosskreutz. I forget the guy's first name, but one of the guys that was shot in Kenosha who had his bicep blown off. And it was just a funny meme. It was just literally a picture of Peter Griffin just doing the, owl, what. Anyway, it's a meme. It's hard to explain, but somebody finally looked at it, was like, Yank, you can't have that. And I was like, that's ridiculous. And then more recently, this was just this week. Well, maybe it was last week that I posted it, where the news reporter that broke the story about Bill Clinton having the private tarmac meeting a few years back, showing up dead. A meme came out that I shared that has Kevin Spacey on the top and Hillary Clinton on the bottom, and it just says, "This is Kevin Spacey saying, LOL, I've had 3 of my accusers end up dead." And then on the bottom it has Hillary, and it says, "That's cute. Hold my adrenochrome." And maybe it's just that one. I posted it on my Instagram story, not a profile, just in my story. Showing against, it says false information in your post. Your post contains the same information as a post reviewed by independent fact checkers. It may have small differences, but then it keeps on going, saying you need to delete this, or else this is a strike against your account. If this happens again, you run the risk of losing your account. And it's like, it's a meme. There's not any bit of accusations in there.
It's not meant to be factual. It's meant to be funny.
And in fact, there's nothing in there that can even be stated. Like, it's not saying, quote, Kevin Spacey said this. These are words next to people's faces. And it's not incorrect that Kevin Spacey had 3 accusers end up dead. That's a fact. And then that's cute. Hold my adrenochrome. And nothing in there says Hillary Clinton stated, there's comedy is now off limits. And if comedy's off limits and comedy's in the no-go zone, then I say we got to use comedy to get as a part of getting our message across. For me personally, that's kind of where I live. Is I see all the seriousness, and I see a lot of the people saying, "Oh, I'm red pilled," or I'm black pilled. Michael Malice likes to look for the white pill. I guess I'm clown pilled. I just want to find a way to be entertained by all the craziness that's happening, because it's going to happen regardless. There's no reason for me to lose sleep or get hopeful or get down. So I've made the choice that it's going on because it's going to happen regardless. So anytime I'm in, like, if I'm in anybody's live stream chat, most of my comments are not, they're on this level of the meme. It's just poking fun. I'd rather have fun with all this than take it so seriously that people are, there's a lot of people even in our movement that just take everything so seriously. And that's, I'm not going to tell everybody how to react to all this stuff. I personally choose to look at it from more of, can you believe how stupid this is? Not a, could you believe how stupid this is? And it's a totally different sentiment. I can say the same words, but my demeanor is just like, this is really dumb.
That's how I try to handle my Twitter, like my Twitter replies and stuff. Like, I try to convey at least some level of seriousness in my response, but I also try to do it in a humorous fashion that people like us who actually pay attention to this stuff are going to look at that and they're going to get a chuckle off of it. And probably the person who is just like completely blue pilled and doesn't get their news from anywhere other than CNN, they're probably going to hate me and be pissed off and block me. And that's fine. But like, I actually had one that it was about the Juneteenth stuff, that it actually turned into a decent conversation, and we were actually in agreement on stuff. But I approached it from a more of a humorous perspective than no, you're wrong. This is what it is. And at the end of the conversation, we were actually on the same page, but we were coming at it we were on the same page, but coming from different directions. We had the converging paths of how we were getting to it. And, it was a good conversation. But if I had come out and been just like total dickhead about it, then we probably never would have gotten to that conclusion. And you see that a lot too, is who is it? Oh gosh, it feels like there was some, and it might very well have been Robin Williams, but like, it was something to the effect of like, try to bring light and humor to every situation. And regardless of how you're coming into it, everybody's going to come out better for it. Like, it's, if you're being light and fun with somebody, even if you absolutely hate each other's opinion, there's a lot better of a chance that you're going to find common ground if you come at it lightly and humorously, and you're both willing to do a little jab here and there, and some give and take. I've got a buddy that he's hardcore Bernie bro, and like super socialist, wants all of that stuff, and we really don't agree on anything except the police. Mm-hmm. And we have found common ground on our distaste for the police, and like it has really changed the dynamic of the way we interact with each other on social media. Because even though, aside from that one point, we are like polar opposites on everything else, we've got that one thing, and so we're willing to hear each other out on the other things, even if there's no chance we're ever going to agree on any of that stuff. We have found some common ground, and we're able to be more light and humorous and jab at each other and take it in stride, as opposed to butt heads and like, just spew hate. And that's, anytime you can take that approach, and which, that gets into other topics and issues, is like with social media and with a lot of this stuff being, typed out interaction, you don't get the nuance of having a conversation. So it can be misconstrued, and it can be hard at times, but you at least want to try to view things from a more of a light position, and try to look at it from that perspective, even if that's not the intent of the other person. I think everybody's just, fucking with me whenever I see some dumb comment.
Well, speaking of what you were talking about with your buddy who's a Bernie bro, another co-host on my podcast, Arona, who lived out in Arizona, he lived in Oregon. He moved to Georgia almost a year ago, and he's a recovering Bernie bro. That's how I've mentioned him to a lot of people for a while. And he was, he'll admit, yeah, I was a lefty. I still think of myself on the left, whatever, or left of center. Or I'm like, whatever, dude. He's moved so far away from that ideology and that mindset since moving here.
See, I
Because
wanted to ask you specifically about him because for anybody who doesn't listen to your show, like you can definitely tell that he has that tilt. Even if he may not be consciously aware of it. I think sometimes he's not consciously aware that he's skewing in that direction, just based on the way the conversation kind of unfolds. But he does lean that way, even if it's not something that he's consciously doing. So that was something that I really wanted to hit on is like, how do you think is the best approach with, especially not dealing with, but getting to interact with him on a weekly basis and doing that show. And y'all do a long show. I mean, it's 2-3 hours of y'all just going on with different topics and stuff. How do you kind of work around that and sort of gear the way you approach things where that it keeps the conversation flowing, and it does and has apparently brought him along from where he was to being a little more receptive to some of the ideas that you and I just kind of latch onto naturally.
I'll say, and this might play the biggest role, and it really has more to do with him as a person, being open, not being so steadfast in this is what I believe and I'm right. And because I'm right, that makes you wrong. And I don't listen to those who are wrong. That's not him at all. So he might already be in a position that's better off than a lot of other people that are dead set in their ideologies. But his transition out of being a staunch socialist Bernie supporter is once he came onto the show, 99% of the stories that we talk about on the show, especially in the beginning, I'm the one that is kind of bringing up to the group. I'm the one I purposefully pick out, okay, I want to talk about this, and this. And we might only get to 3 of them, but I want to cover them all because I think that there's an important message or lesson to be learned from it. And so he was immediately being exposed to stories and details about things that he had never heard of before and coming from avenues that he was unaware of. So because that right there in itself really started to chisel down and make him question himself. Do I really believe what I believe? And do I really believe it as emphatically as I think I do? Or am I just believing this because it's the easiest thing for me to claim to believe when I'm in Oregon and parts of Phoenix, where the people that I surround myself with, your entry ticket is you got to be a Bernie supporter to be hanging out with us. Back to Georgia and being exposed to a lot of the podcasts that we listen to and the new brought up on the show and the manner in which I talk about them has made him question, undoubtedly it's made him question everything that he thought he believed politically anyway. And the result of that, at least over this past year, he's even acknowledged it. He's now sending me stuff that, hey, I want to talk about this. And I'm like, okay, you've really gone for it, I guess is what I'm saying, is like, you're not the same guy that you were 2 years ago. And it shows. And Doug and I on the show have talked about this. It's like, that wasn't ever really our goal. In fact, my goal with the show was to have me, who's a wavering ANCAP anarchist, Christian monarchy, that's got me thinking. but I'm not ready to go down that path yet. But that's the area that I'm in. A guy who's politically agnostic, and Doug, who's just lived a lot longer and has a lot of opinions and thinks everything regarding politics is trash. And then a Bernie bro. I was like, in my mind, I was like, that could be a really fun thing to do, to see if we can all actually have a conversation and not kill each other. And what's ended up happening is, the most noticeable thing is that Arona has kind of dropped his leftist ways and the way that he thinks. He's immediately more critical, sometimes more so than I am, about things, which kind of terrifies me, because I'm like, okay, don't go too far right. You don't want to wade in those waters, because
Let's stay out of Q land.
You're not ready to engage with those folks to understand where they're full of shit yet. So baby steps, baby Q-tards all day long, if that's what you want, but baby steps.
Yeah.
Don't radicalize so fast that you slingshot yourself over into another area where I can't save you from. But I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what has been going on with him.
See, she can probably hear me in there, and she's gonna come yell at me. But that's sort of a similar path that my wife has taken. Like when we first got together, she was more of a Bernie supporter, if not like full on Bernie bro. And I was still kind of at a divorced from politics point in my life. Like I was just anarchy all the way. And I've kind of softened on that a bit, not a whole lot, but at least a little bit. But just in some of the stuff that I listen to and read and look at and share, she has, and like I've tried not to explicitly push any of that on her. Like we never talked about politics when we were dating, and we never really honestly, and prior to the last like year and a half, we never talked about politics at all. And she has come all the way around to like basically borderline anarchist. She looks at some of this stuff. She'll even, like you're saying, like she'll even send stuff to me and show me stuff, and she'll be like, "Look at this bullshit! What in the hell?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I know, dear." Like, but you know, she's finding that stuff, and like to see the light come on, and you know, like the red pill kick in. It's been really entertaining, but and maybe, you know, maybe we're both kind of onto something. Like it's not about trying to push that on people. Maybe it's just about having normal interactions and letting them kind of expose themselves to it over time and kind of figure it out on their own. And I mean, obviously there are some that like it's just not gonna happen. It will never click, and that's on both sides. Like that's, you know, Democrats and Republicans, they're the ones that are just like hardcore. It is never going to click. But there are others that, you know, they just need time to absorb it for themselves. It was really interesting talking about coming from both sides, the right and the left, because I think, especially for the two of us, with being more engaged in like Facebook and Twitter, especially, where you really do get some pretty extreme leftist views on stuff, and you don't see the right wing side of it quite as much, like unless you've really found that niche portion of social media that you've gone after that side of things. It's much more on the leftist side. But during the Donald Rainwater campaign for governor here in Indiana, because the Democrats really are an afterthought in Indiana, it's like it is all about the Republicans, basically. The biggest pushback on the Rainwater campaign came from like neocon hardcore Republicans, more so than like you didn't get a lot of opposition from Democrats. It all came from the Republicans. And I got in a pretty heated debate with a lady about what she thought libertarianism was. And after, oh gosh, I mean, it went on for at least 3 days. And it was like the long drawn out, like 1,000-word essay post going back and forth between me and her. And at the end of it, like at the beginning, she clearly did not know anything about libertarianism. Like she more or less thought we were radical communists.
And they'll just want to give heroin to baby.
Yeah, and the crazy shit. And by the end of it, she had not changed her position, but at the end of it, she did acknowledge that Ron Paul and libertarianism were not what she thought they were, and were not as bad as she had originally thought they were. So, it's at least a baby step. Like she's an old woman, and she's probably never going to give libertarianism a try. But at least by the end of the conversation, it wasn't this horrible, evil thing that was going to destroy the world anymore. It was just not something she wanted.
Yeah, no, and you got to start somewhere. The fact that she even had a conversation with you, that in itself is a step in a good direction, I believe. And there's people out there that make the argument, don't even try to engage with them. And I understand that argument as well. And that's kind of where I'm at right now is, like I said a minute ago, from an ANCAP to an anarchist to a Christian monarch. There's so many different ways. Like if one thing that could be said is that I think that libertarians are far more engaged in paying attention to politics than even Democrats or Republicans. I think a lot, for the most part, at least their core base, they don't pay that much attention. We inherently do, which therefore I think that we are the ones that should probably be listened to. You can't ask a Republican about, fiscal policy or a Democrat because neither one of them know. They don't have an idea. They just know that whatever the other side's doing, they don't like that. And even in our circles where, the whole term, the autistic libertarian, we get so ingrained down to, are you a real libertarian? Are you degree? If not, then I'm going to go find some new way to think about this whole politics thing. But I'm interested in all of that. I want to hear everybody talk about that. Like I love listening to Buck Johnson, have Tho Bishop on, and have Matt Erickson on, and talk about how Dave Smith is doing everything wrong. And then I also like to listen to Dave Smith talking about, I'm not interested in them or what they got going on. I'm going to do it my way. I'm like, yeah, you should. Fuck them. And then I'll hear like Pete Quinones. He also had Matt Erickson on, and it's an interesting story, and it's an interesting way to think about things. And I'm intrigued by anybody that thinks differently than me. I want to hear everything you have to say, because if it's something I haven't thought of, who knows? It might be beneficial. It might be something that I actually agree with. I just am not aware of it. And so with Adam Patrick from your Talking Over Me podcast. And that one was the episode where I think I tweeted it out or messaged Pete, and I was just like, thank you for this one. This explicitly says where I'm at right now. I'm glad that there are people out there that are still thinking about these things, and it doesn't feel so alienating to know that you're still questioning things. Like just because I say I'm a libertarian doesn't mean I'm just done. And well, this is it. This is where I'm going to be forever. So I can put the thinking brain down and then just go to battle with R's and D's and try to scorch them in, Twitter mentions. I'm still very intrigued with different ideologies and different ways of thinking. I may not adopt them, but I respect the people that are out there swinging that bat. If if you understand.
Right. I watch Matt's live stream as often as I can when he and Stephen Messina go on and do King Killed, and which I think you're on that pretty regularly too. But like, I don't agree. I think Matt has a brilliant way of looking at and thinking about things. I don't agree with him much, if at all, but I still really like hearing that opinion, and it makes me think about things from a different perspective. Like it doesn't necessarily bring me around to that way of thinking. Just like I've had good conversations with Tho and got to meet him in person, and I've heard all of his thoughts on stuff, and we engage semi regularly, and I don't agree with uh, you know his position on working through the GOP, just because I came from that. Like I came from that world in you know super red state Kentucky, and live in that world in super red state Indiana. And just from my experience, I don't think that has any uh, reasonable bearing as being something that's going to work. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't work for Florida. Doesn't mean that it can't work in Texas. Like, and that's something that I've talked about fairly regularly on my show. Is like, there is no blanket policy that's going to work for literally anything. We are much different here out in the county than what they are 5 miles in town. Like, it's literally a 5 mile drive, and it is night and day different from how we are right here to how they are right there. And if there's that big of a difference in that short of a stretch, yeah, you can't have blanket anything for New York, California, Texas, Montana, Florida, Mississippi. It doesn't work. So everything has to be a localized approach, and I think that kind of ties everything that we've been talking about up in a nice little bow. This is like every conversation that you have where this stuff is concerned has to be an individual conversation, and like the way you approach it. Like, I try to bring everything with a combination of facts and humor, because if I can hit you with facts and I can keep it light, then you're more likely to continue to engage. And it might be shit posting like New Hampshire, or it might be just straight up towing party lines like the Indiana Twitter feed. Everything has to be done on a individual basis, which individualism is one of the primary cornerstones of libertarianism anyway. So
yeah, and to echo what you said, there are parts that I agree with, though. There's parts that I agree with Matt, and there's parts I agree with David, or not David, Dave Smith. And like, just like you said, what works in Florida probably won't work in Iowa, and they don't have to. For a lot of the people that are out there talking about a national divorce, secession, and breaking up, and you go this way and we go that way because we're so different. Why the hell are you trying to prescribe one method as far as how to vote in a political system? You're automatically going against the things that you already stand on. So this is kind of dumb. This isn't that's one way I know that you are a libertarian is you're speaking in absolutes. It's like, allow there to be nuance.
Right. If you're a secessionist, you can't also be a, one size fits all approach, because secession is already throwing that out the window.
Yeah. And in the natural world, there's always get a second opinion from your doctor. Make sure you go visit 3 different car dealerships before you make a purchase. Like, if you're going to be smart about it, you never just buy into one thing. No decent financial advisor is going to tell you put all of your money in one thing and one thing only. There's more than one way to get to the desired result, and not any one person's method is the tried and true only way. I think that's the most ridiculous way to talk about things, is like that everything that's going on over here is wrong, and the people that are doing it are stupid and bad or whatever. And you should listen to me because I'm just the guy who gets it. I got a lot of issues with people that talk like that, and I'll mock them and try to have fun and in a humorous way. But I think that the better way to go about things is just to allow there to be multiple different ways to get to the place that we all claim that we want to end up. And And in the meantime, just try to be as entertaining with it as you can, and hopefully, convert a few people here and there to think a little more critically, and who knows what happens after that.
Hell yeah. If somebody's at least, taking the time to think about it from a slightly different perspective than what they would have otherwise, then that's success. Like, success is not having a libertarian in the White House. Success is having people wake up and start to think for themselves and put that big, beautiful brain to use. That's, if nothing else, the public education system has dulled everybody's brain. And if we can just have good conversations with people that get them using some function of what they've lost, then we have been successful.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I think we'll wrap on that. That was pretty good. That actually kind of took everything that I wanted to talk about and tied it all together and put a pretty little bow on it here at the end. Jim, thanks for coming on again and joining me. And we will definitely have to do this another time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin.
Yes, sir.